Hi, hey Russ here, and welcome back to my shop. Today I want to do a video that is inspired by Art Mulder. His channel is Words in Wood by Art Mulder. I'll try to leave a description in the his channel link in the description. He just did his video about how to make a box and cut all your sides of your box easily and keep the orientation of your grain in order so that it wraps around the box as you go. So you want to cut your piece based on the sides, on the 4 pieces on your box. One front, side, front, back, and the other side. And you can start and stop on these pieces anywhere you want. But what he did was he set up his sled, and this I have to give you kudos for, Art. He made note that his fence here on the front is also 90 degrees to his blade, same as the back. And he did that so that he can actually put a board against the front and use this to do his cut instead of doing it back here. Most of the time, I do my cut back here, but like him, I made sure this one was parallel, was exactly 90 degrees to my blade, so that if for some reason I want to cut it up here, I can just do it without having to go through a lot of hoops to do it. And so, kudos, Art. Clever idea. I've never heard anybody out there mention about making both fences this exact. And I agree. I did that on mine, and it is handy once in a while to do that. So the way he made his board is he has his pieces front, side, back, side, so that as he puts them together, they wrap around and the grain will stay there. So you have 2 different dimensions on your making your box. And he set up 2 stop blocks. He set one up here, and he set the other side dimension here, and he made his cuts. And that works. I actually like that. But I have one question, Art. What if that's a 6-sided box? What if it's an 8-sided box, and they're all different dimensions? Anyway, with my method, you can actually, it doesn't matter. Let me show you how I do it, and you'll see why. So on mine, I'm going to make a box out of this, let's say. This piece of wood, 21 inches or so long. And I'm going to make a box that's 5 by 3 and 13/16. Now that's an oddball number. And the reason I say that is that what that means is that when I cut these pieces out of this board, I got to cut 5 inches, 3 and 13/16, 5 inches, and 3 and 13/16. Try to measure that out with your ruler and get everything right. Well, with my method, just like Art's, you really don't have to do any measuring. All I do is, instead of using 2 stop blocks, I just make a spacer. So, if I want to make 2 pieces, one 5, one at 3 and 13/16, if I subtract the one from the other, that means I have 1 and 3/16 difference. So I make a spacer, 1 and 3/13/16. And now, when I cut my board, I put it in my sled, and I make my cut, and that's a 5-inch cut. Move it off to the side, put my spacer in there, slide up to my spacer, and I make that cut. This piece is now 3 and 13/16 because of the spacer. Take the spacer out, I slide over, make my 3rd cut, and now I have another 5-inch piece, do my 4th cut, and I do that, and now I have my 4 pieces are cut. They're all cut to the right dimension. They're exactly what I want them to be, and I'm ready to move on to do my joinery, whatever that is going to be. My pieces are now cut to the right dimension and are square to start with, which is what you want. If you're doing a 6-sided box, this is where this method works a little bit better. Because if I'm doing a 6-sided box, let's say my dimensions on that box are 5 inches, 3 and 3/16, and 3 inches. And I have a 6-sided box. Well, how would you do that? Well, easily enough, I would make 2 spacers. One is going to be 1 and 3/16, so I still can get a 3 and 13/16 cut. And the other one is going to be a 2-inch spacer. So now what do? I mark out my board roughly like I did before, but for 6 pieces. And I mark them 1 through 6. And then I take my 2 spacers. I make my first cut here, put my spacer in here, the spacer number 1, the 1 3/16 spacer, and I make cut number 2. Take it out, put spacer number 2, which is 2 inches wide, and I make my third cut. Then I start over, make my longest cut, make my spacer number 2 cut, and make my spacer number 3 cut. And when I'm done, I now have 6 pieces that are all the proper exact size and square, ready to do my joinery on all 6 pieces. They're now all going to be marked because I marked my tape with all the pieces. Now, let's talk real quick about marking the tape. What I do is, I want to cut this one into 4 pieces, but I want my grain to follow around, so piece side 1, side 2, side 3, as you wrap around the board. And all the grain will pop up and be even as you go around if your pieces are numbered. So I put a piece of tape on here and put it to one edge. This is now, I call this my top. I call this my face. And the first thing I do to make it 5 by 3 3/13/16, I take my ruler, I put it here, and I mark 5 inches. Throw it on that 5-inch mark, and I mark out 3 3/13/16. They don't have to be exact, just so you're roughly there. Set that there and mark 5. Go here and mark 3 3/13/16. I now have rough dimensions of my 4 boards, and I mark it 1, 2, 3, 4. Now when I cut them apart, I'm not going by these lines. I'm going by my stop block. So that line isn't going to matter. What matters is that this 1 will be on this board when I do my final cut. 2 will be on this board. And so measuring out this way doesn't really matter. But what's really important is that you have your numbers on there so that when you get ready to assemble your box, your orientation of all your pieces will be correct so that your grain will line up. And so that's how you do a box. That's how you do a 6-sided box instead of a 4, or an 8-sided box. Just number how many spaces you got, and you can make these cuts accurately and quick, and then move on to do your joinery after that. So anyway, I want to thank Art for inspiring me on this. And I do have one more thing I want to say, Art. And I apologize now because I'm not really trying to criticize you, but I saw a critical mistake when you were doing that. And I really have to say something because I've seen other people do it too. And what that is that when he put this block in here and he clamped it down to make this cut, and it doesn't matter whether you're doing the cut here or here, when you put this piece in there up against your block and he went to make this cut, he held this piece on this side of the blade. The block and this piece and the blade is here, and he was holding it here, and he made his cut. When he came back, that piece kicked out. Didn't kick out fast, but it kicked out. And that's where there is a problem. I see so many people doing that, and I never really said anything. When you cut this piece, if you're using a stop block, and it doesn't matter whether you're doing it here, on your router, on your miter saw, excuse me, it doesn't matter. This is the piece you got to hold. You can hold this if you want. You got to hold this piece. When you go here, you put your hand there and cut it. Now this piece is going to stay still. Otherwise, that piece could easily get pinched between here and the blade if it shifts at all. Because when it shifts, it ain't going to shift against the block. It's going to shift against the blade, and that causes it to kick out. Hold this piece always. Make your cut. If you want to hold both, that's fine. That doesn't matter. This one you have to hold. So when you're here against the block, this is the piece you got to make sure you're holding. Always. Keep that in mind when you're doing your cuts. Always hold the piece that has the stop block against it. That's the one that's going to get you in trouble otherwise. So keep that in mind. Art, again, thank you. I thought your video was fabulous. A lot of good examples of good ideas there, not just the one. And anyway, I want to thank you. If you like this video, please say so. If you have any comments about it, good or bad, don't be afraid to leave them. I read them all. I enjoy reading them. But most importantly, come back again. I'm sure that I'm going to do more videos. And hopefully you'll be back to enjoy them. Thanks, and you have a good day.